y bienvenido a mi canal. Yo me llamo Sirey. Soy una abogada afro-latina licenciada practicando las leyes criminales, pero como todos ustedes, a mí me fascina cuando estamos hablando de casos de crímenes reales. En este video vamos a seguir hablando del caso de Barry Morphew. Si quieren más video en español, nada más dime allá abajo. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Desiree. I'm a licensed and practicing Afro-Latina criminal attorney who, much like the rest of you, has a severe fascination with true crime cases. Listen, you guys, thank you so much for staying here with me as we discuss all of the intricacies involved in the Barry Lee Morphew case. So without further ado, this is the third part of our multi-part saga on Barry Lee Morphew. So when we talked in the last video, we left off with the fact that the elected district attorney for the 11th Judicial District of Colorado was disbarred, partly as a result of her actions or inactions relating to Barry Lee Morphew's case.
The Republican district attorney who let a high-profile murder case unravel and then investigated the judge is now being disbarred. Linda Stanley will no longer be able to serve as DA for Chaffee, Fremont, Custer, and Park counties.
9 News reporter Janelle Finch joins us now. And Janelle, Stanley went from the center of a major case to losing her law license.
That's right. Linda Stanley botched the murder case against Barry Morphew, then targeted the judge in the case. Morphew was accused of killing his missing wife, Suzanne, in 2020. The 83-page decision from a panel under the Colorado Supreme Court included several complaints for how Stanley handled herself in and out of the courtroom.
My name is Linda Stanley.
Linda Stanley is marking the end of her time as a district attorney with the potential end of her career.
It's certainly a fall from grace.
9 News legal expert Scott Robinson says Stanley can't be jailed for unethical behavior, but disbarment is nearly as severe. The state's complaints accuses Stanley of misconduct while handling the murder case against Barry Morphew.
If District Attorney Linda Stanley had only violated discovery rules and withheld exculpatory evidence, I don't think she would have been recommended for disbarment.
The state says Stanley made inappropriate comments about the case to the media and launched a secret investigation into the presiding judge in retaliation for his rulings.
We want to make sure that the people who are representing the state of Colorado in criminal cases are acting ethically, and the vast majority of prosecutors do just that. That's why it was really troublesome to learn about what Linda Stanley was accused of.
The Colorado Supreme Court will make the ruling on Stanley's future.
They are the final say.
Attorney Iris Edon, who represented Morphew, hopes the disbarment sticks. In a statement to 9 News, she writes, "This was absolutely the right outcome. Linda Stanley will no longer be permitted to wield significant power as a prosecutor." Edon says this only came about after Stanley harmed many people and caused great damage. The Colorado District Attorney's Council says Stanley is still the acting DA, as the disbarment won't take effect for another 35 days. During this time, she can still appeal the decision.
As I read you the opinion, I want you to take note of the fact that it was stated that partly because of her actions, Barry Lee Morphew's case, if there were to be a further one, was to switch venues. What that literally means is, instead of being tried in the 11th Judicial District for Colorado, this case would be tried in a completely different district. There was so much that happened there that it just couldn't be tried in that district any further. But let's talk about what happened after that, shall we? So it's my understanding that after his release from custody, Barry decided to return to normal life. He moved from Colorado to Arizona, and at some point, yet again, he was arrested and charged with Suzanne Morphew's disappearance and death.
We begin with a major development of the death of Suzanne Morphew. Her husband, Barry Morphew, charged with her murder again. A grand jury indicting him on a charge of first-degree murder. He was taken into custody in Arizona today and is waiting extradition to Colorado. Morphew is accused of killing his wife, Suzanne, on Mother's Day 2020. Now, he was first charged with her murder in 2021. Those charges, though, were dropped just days before the trial because of prosecutorial misconduct, which in fact led to the disbarment of the district attorney, Linda Stanley.
This dates from the 12th Judicial District Grand Jury. The 12th Judicial District of Colorado names the elected district attorney for the 12th Judicial District, which is Ann E. Kelly. Case number is now 25 CR 128, and it says Grand Jury Indictment. Count 1, murder in the first degree. On or about May 9th to May 10th, 2020, in or triable in the state of Colorado, Barry Morphew unlawfully, feloniously, after deliberation with intent to cause the death of a person other than himself, caused the death of Suzanne Morphew in violation of Section 18-3-102-1A. Further, probable cause for count 1 is as follows. At 5:46 p.m. on May 10th of 2020, Mother's Day Sunday, Suzanne Morphew was reported missing to police by her neighbor. The last known person to see her alive was her husband, Barry Morphew. Investigators responded to the Morphew residence at 19057 Puma Path in Salida, Colorado, to investigate the missing person report. The house was locked and Suzanne Morphew was not home. Her vehicle was in the garage. There were no signs of forced entry and her bike was missing. Later that evening, her bike was located down a hillside off a dirt road between her house and Highway 50. The bike was located less than a mile from the Morphew home. On May 14th, 2020, her bike helmet was located 10 meters off the side of Highway 50, approximately 1.52 miles west of the Morphew home and approximately 0.84 miles west of where her bike was located. Barry Morphew was interviewed and told police that he set his alarm and woke up at 4:30 a.m. on May 10th, 2020. He told police that he left at 5 a.m. on May 10th, 2020 for a pre-planned work trip in Broomfield, Colorado. According to Barry Morphew, Suzanne Morphew was still asleep in bed when he left the house at 5 a.m. on May 10th, 2020. He told police she planned to ride her bike that day. Barry Morphew stated that upon arriving in Broomfield that morning, he checked into a hotel before shortly leaving after for the job site. He told police that he received a call around 5 p.m. on May 10th, 2020 from his neighbors while physically at the Broomfield job site. The neighbors told Barry Morphew that his daughters were concerned because they could not reach Suzanne all day. Barry instructed the neighbors to check the house and specifically to look for her bike. The neighbors reported to Barry that neither Suzanne nor her bike were at the house, and Barry then instructed them to call the sheriff. Police interviewed one of Barry's employees scheduled to assist him with the Broomfield job. The employee told law enforcement that the employee and Barry were not planning to leave for Broomfield until the evening hours of May 10th, 2020. They were supposed to drive together. Instead, Barry left without telling the employee. Barry called the employee at approximately 11:18 a.m. and informed the employee that he had left without them. When the employee arrived in Broomfield on Sunday evening, the employee noticed that Barry Morphew had failed to bring the proper tools with him for the job and the necessary materials for the job had not yet arrived at the job site. Review of the cameras at the hotel and nearby businesses revealed that Barry Morphew was in the Broomfield area for approximately 9 hours and 45 minutes. Of those hours, he spent less than 1/2 hour at the job site. Instead, besides 2 brief visits to the job site area, electronic evidence and cameras from businesses showed him driving around to various locations and discarding unknown items in the separate trash cans. Hotel footage then showed Barry Morphew arriving back at his hotel room and remaining inside the room from approximately 12:34 p.m. to 5:55 p.m. Inconsistent with his statement to police, he was in the hotel and not at the job site when he received the call about his wife, Suzanne Morphew, being unresponsive and missing. In early interviews with Barry Morphew, he told law enforcement that his marriage to Suzanne Morphew was, quote, the best, and the two had a, quote, wonderful weekend together. When Barry was asked whether Suzanne would say anything different about the relationship, Barry stated no. Barry Morphew's statements about his marriage to Suzanne were inconsistent with other witnesses' accounts and evidence located. Specifically, investigators learned that Suzanne confided in people that she was unhappy in the marriage in the weeks and months leading up to her disappearance. She discussed plans to divorce Barry Morphew with her close friend. She maintained documented notes of the problem in the relationship recovered from electronic devices and physical search of the Morphew home. Suzanne Morphew had been having a secret affair with an old acquaintance who had lived out of state. She communicated with him daily over LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Suzanne's last known electronic message to anyone was to this person on May 9th, 2020 at 2:11 p.m., just 32 minutes before Barry Morphew returned to the home that day. An overall timeline of the week of Suzanne Morphew's disappearance shows that the disappearance coincided with her daughter, the only other occupant of the Morphew residence, leaving on a pre-planned road trip out of state. Because of this, Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew expected to be alone at the residence starting on May 5th, 2020, until either late in the day on May 10th or into May 11th, 2020. Suzanne Morphew drove blank to Gunnison, Colorado on May 5th, 2020 to depart with her sister and friend on the planned road trip. After May 5th, 2020, Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew were alone at the house. A forensic download of Barry Morphew's cell phone revealed that Barry Morphew had deleted a text chain with Suzanne Morphew from which an image of a single text remained. A screenshot of this single text message was saved on Barry Morphew's phone on May 6, 2020. The image revealed a text from Suzanne that stated, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." On May 11, 2020, authorities commenced a search of the Morphew residence that spanned several days. The state of the residence and vehicles showed no signs of a break-in or intruder. Even with no signs of a break-in or intruder, law enforcement collected items of potential evidence in DNA swabs. DNA analysis of the swabs collected produced several DNA profile mixtures consistent with what would be expected in the common areas of a home or a vehicle. The mixture profiles were processed through offender databases and were compared to the profiles of known individuals who may have been present in the vehicles or the residence. The results did not lead to any stranger or intruder suspects. An expert in DNA analysis testified that law enforcement provided analysis with one of the partial profiles developed from the glove box of Suzanne Morphew's vehicle for further investigation using a keyboard search. This allowed for additional comparisons to profiles in more databases with less stringent quality-controlled standards than the National DNA Index system for the limited purpose of creating possible investigative leads. That expert further testified that there were matches to outside databases nationwide. The term match, used by DNA analysts, does not mean identical. Rather, a match only means that there were other profiles that could not be excluded at the limited number of loci available from the partial profile for comparison. The expert explained that she then compared the matches from those databases to the partial profile from the mixture on the glove box and excluded those out-of-state profiles as not originating from the same contributor in all but 3 instances. Finally, the expert explained that just because those profiles from the databases matched at the limited loci available for comparison, it did not mean that any people from out-of-state profiles were the same person that contributed the partial profile to the mixture on the glove box. Law enforcement investigated those 3 partial matches obtained from 3 separate out-of-state sources and found no connection to the case. Law enforcement located a locked gun safe in the garage during the search of the Morphew residence. Inside that gun safe, law enforcement located a dart rifle, or tranquilizer rifle, positioned towards the front of the safe. Law enforcement also found packages of new dart brand tranquilizer darts in the gun safe. The packages of darts included capped hypodermic needles inside of them, which were designed to load the darts. Law enforcement found one of these needle caps in the dryer after the dryer's contents were removed. Law enforcement also found men's shorts among the contents of the dryer that were removed prior to finding the needle cap. The shorts appeared consistent with shorts Barry Morphew was seen on video wearing on May 9th, 2020, less than 1 hour before he returned to the Morphew residence. No tranquilizer formula was located during law enforcement's search of the home and vehicle. Police investigated numerous electronic devices and Suzanne Morphew's social media accounts, searching, among other things, for proof of life. That investigation revealed that Suzanne Morphew had not communicated electronically with any living person after 2:11 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. Her last possible activity on any account protected by password access was 3:08 p.m., over 24 hours prior to her being reported missing. Records showing her typical use of electronics and social media demonstrated that this was inconsistent with her typical pattern of life in the days leading up to her disappearance. Additionally, witnesses indicated that they attempted to communicate with Suzanne Morphew throughout the time frame, but received no response from her. These witnesses indicated that her lack of response was out of the ordinary. Barry Morphew's electronic devices were also analyzed. A download of the infotainment system on Barry Morphew's truck recovered telematics data showing the location and activity of his truck at certain times on May 9th and May 10th of 2020. A download of Barry Morphew's cell phone showed additional location information. Based on data from his cell phone, Barry Morphew returned to the Morphew residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. The data did not show his phone or truck leaving the residence again until the morning of May 10th, 2020. The download of Barry Morphew's cell phone registered events related to his phone. An expert forensic analyst determined that some of the events were in fact Barry Morphew's phone being turned off during the time frame of May 9th into May 10th, 2020. Turning off a cell phone effectively disables its ability to record location information. Specifically, the forensic analyst noted that Barry Morphew's phone download showed it was turned off at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th, 2020, only a few minutes after he arrived home at the residence where Suzanne Morphew sent her last electronic communication to anyone. At approximately 10:17 p.m. on May 9th, 2020, the phone was turned back on. Barry Morphew's cell phone was again turned off at 4:32 p.m. on May 10th, 2020, prior to him leaving the residence on his trip to Broomfield, Colorado, and was not turned on again until 5:37 a.m. when location information showed him on the road already in the area of Johnson Village, Colorado. Testimony established that the times Barry Morphew turned off his phone corresponded to periods of time of significance in the case where location information was consequently unavailable. Similarly, further analysis of the information from Barry Morphew's infotainment system, or the telematic, in his truck showed an irregular gap in recorded activities. Specifically, from approximately 3:49 a.m. to approximately 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, 2020, there is no recorded data registering on Barry's infotainment system. An indication of no truck activity from telematics is inconsistent with other facts developed from Barry Morphew's phone, surveillance footage, and Barry Morphew's statement about his activities on May 10th, 2020. Specifically, telematics data showed Barry Morphew arrive at his residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. It then registered various other activities throughout the afternoon at the residence until it ceased at 9:52 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. The telematics data then showed activities resume from 3:25 a.m. to 3:49 a.m. on May 10th, 2020 at a GPS location consistent with his driveway. Barry Morphew reported to law enforcement that he was asleep during that time frame. From 3:49 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, 2020, the infotainment system, or telematics, did not register any data despite the fact that Barry Morphew's cell phone indicated that the device was in Johnson's Village at 5:37 a.m. on that date, and Barry reported being in his truck traveling to Broomfield at that time. When recorded telematics data became available again in the records from the infotainment system downloaded 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, 2020, corresponding GPS coordinates showed that Barry Morphew had already arrived in the area of Broomfield, Colorado. This gap in registered data is inconsistent with the pattern of telematics data captured in the days and weeks leading up to the event. Phone records from Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew were analyzed by expert investigators. The FBI CAS team analyzed phone records for both Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew to determine location information and device usage related to their cell phones. In Suzanne Morphew's phone records, there was no indication of any user-initiated activity after the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone device continued to connect through RTT data with the cell tower that services the Morphew home throughout the night of May 9th into the early morning of May 10th, 2020. These automated data connections, however, were consistent with the tower reaching out to the phone to determine its location and not initiated by the user of the device. After 4:23 a.m. on May 10, 2020, Suzanne's phone ceased to connect at all, ever again. Just 8 minutes later, Barry Morphew's cell phone data showed his phone ceased to connect starting at 4:31 a.m., consistent with the cell phone download showing it powered off at 4:32 a.m. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone never registered on any towers other than the tower consistent with the Morphew residence from the time Barry Morphew returned home around 2:43 p.m. on May 9, 2020 to the time it ceased activity altogether at 4:23 a.m. on May 10, 2020. Despite searches for this device, Suzanne Morphew's cell phone was never found. Police interviewed people that knew Barry Morphew prior to his move from Indiana to Colorado in 2018. These witnesses told law enforcement that Barry Morphew was a deer farmer in Indiana. Several individuals told law enforcement that Barry Morphew used a specific tranquilizer called BAM to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barry Morphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at the time he tranquilized a deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence. On September 22, 2023, human remains were found in and around a shallow clandestine grave in Saguache County, Colorado, near Highway 17. The remains were found a few hundred feet down a dirt road off Highway 17. This location was less than an hour south of the Morphew residence by main highways. The remains were determined to be those of Suzanne Morphew. The majority of her bones were recovered. Many of the bones were significantly bleached. Along with Suzanne's bones, law enforcement recovered a cancer report and items of clothing, some of which were consistent with biking clothing Suzanne was known to wear. There was no visible perimortem trauma observed. A board-certified forensic anthropologist, a botanist, and an entomologist all analyzed the remains and several observations were noted. There was a distinct lack of bug activity which is inconsistent with the remains having decomposed at that location. The clothing items lacked evidence of decomposition, which was inconsistent with Suzanne Morphew wearing the bike clothes at the time her body decomposed. Additionally, there was a lack of animal predation on the bones. There was only a very small amount of desiccated soft tissue found on a few of the bones, and there was no hair mass located. All these features would have been expected if this had been the original gravesite where decomposition occurred. The forensic anthropologist opined that based on these factors, it was unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location. The El Paso County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. In addition to the standard toxicology testing, the Coroner's Office conducted additional toxicology testing at the request of law enforcement for the presence of chemical mixture known as BAM, or the combination of butyrophenol, azaparone, and medetomidine. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All three of the individual chemicals that comprise BAM were present. Additionally, the metabolite for butyrophenol was present. The metabolite's presence also indicated that her death was not immediate following BAM exposure because Suzanne Morphew's body had begun to metabolize the drug before she died. The coroner's office determined the cause of death and the manner of death as follows: homicide by unspecified means in the setting of BAM intoxication. A pharmacologist and medical doctor testified about the toxicology testing done to determine the presence of BAM in Suzanne Morphew's remains, about the chemical compound itself, and about the possible effects of the compound in humans. The expert explained that toxicology testing done by the coroner's office met scientific standards of reliability and accuracy. He further testified that BAM is a chemical mixture of 3 specific compounds used as a tool for sedating animals for medical treatment or movement. Back in 2020 and the years leading up to Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, BAM was sold by only one company in the United States and could only be obtained by prescription from a veteran. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection to be effective, as the skin and GI tract do not absorb it effectively. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. For that reason, there is no scientific studies available that address the possible effects the compound would have on humans. The pharmacology expert testified that the compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constriction to the recipient's ability to breathe. Records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to Barry Morphew. Records were also obtained for BAM prescriptions for all persons within the counties and adjacent counties to where the Morphews lived and where Suzanne Morphew's remains were located. Those records show that Barry Morphew obtained and filled several prescriptions for BAM while living in Indiana. Barry Morphew's last purchase of BAM by prescription was in March of 2018. Barry obtained multiple kits that each contained multiple doses just a few months before the Morphews moved to Colorado. Records further showed that no other private citizens or private businesses in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service were the only entities that received prescriptions for BAM in those counties from 2017 through 2020. Investigators learned that each of these government entities enforced tight regulations to monitor the BAM prescription storage and use. None of the BAM from the agencies was unaccounted for. Ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in the entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew. I know I don't typically take my time to read the entirety of documents to you guys, but I felt like this one was important. If we're going through all the evidence that is against Barry, and I'm going to say everything's alleged because he has not yet been convicted, I think that the prosecutors so far have made a compelling case. Barry discovers that his wife is participating in an affair. His wife tells him that she wants to leave him. He then, as someone who hunts deer, has access to this mixture known as BAM, and that BAM mixture is found in Suzanne's body. Not only that, there were multiple experts who testified that the location that her body was found in was not the location that it decomposed in. And what that means to me is that the body was transported from somewhere to the location it was ultimately found in. There is so much to unpack in this Morphew case. And my preliminary thoughts are, at least in reading this, it seems like the 12th Judicial District has learned from the mistakes of the 11th, and they're trying to present their case in the best way they possibly can to get justice for Suzanne. As of right now, Barry Morphew has a status conference set for January 12th of 2026. The trial, I'm assuming, will be forthcoming shortly after the status conference, but I'm not sure of the date for the trial just yet. When the trial happens, and if you guys want, we can cover that too. But that's all for this video. And thank you guys so much for listening to me as I took my time to explain the Barry Morphew case to you. Actually, the Suzanne Morphew case to you. Thank you guys so much. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, y'all take care.